The story begins by showing a terrorist attack in New York City, USA. This attack takes place on 11th September 2001, when four passenger airplanes hijacked by terrorists are crashed into different parts of the United States. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York quickly turn into flames and smoke, and thousands of innocent people lose their lives in the attack. Later, it is revealed that the mastermind behind the attack is terrorist Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, who is hiding somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan. A few days later, a high-level meeting is held in Washington. It is decided that small teams of special forces will first be sent to Afghanistan, where they will fight alongside local fighters against the Taliban. This decision is extremely risky because, at that time, the United States has no solid ground intelligence about Afghanistan. The story then shifts to Captain Nelson, a U.S. Army Special Forces officer. He has just moved into a new house with his family to spend his vacation. However, after watching the news on TV, he becomes restless. He goes to his office, speaks to his senior officer, and volunteers for the upcoming mission. Initially, his senior tries to stop him because Nelson has never been to war and has no experience in such situations. But Nelson insists on going to Afghanistan to avenge the attack. Nelson is promoted to captain and, along with a team of 12 men, departs for Uzbekistan. They land at K2 base, located 97 miles north of Afghanistan. After arriving, Nelson faces another challenge. He is informed that 5 other teams have also been interviewed for this mission, so expectations are high. He meets his senior officer, who explains that although the mind behind the attacks is bin Laden, his strength comes from the Taliban in Afghanistan. If they eliminate this support, they can weaken him. Capturing Mazar-i-Sharif is crucial because whoever controls it controls Afghanistan. The officer gives Nelson 6 weeks to complete the mission, but Nelson wants to finish it in 3 weeks. He explains that snowfall will block the routes by mid-November, making it impossible to reach the city later. After the interview, Nelson and his 11 teammates are selected. His senior officer gives him a piece of metal from the Twin Towers and tells him that the most important thing a soldier carries into war is a reason. Nelson is assigned as the team leader of a 12-member unit. Each soldier is highly experienced. Some are communication experts. Others are medics or weapons specialists. Though experienced, Afghanistan is unfamiliar territory for all of them. Their mission is clear: travel to Afghanistan, contact General Dostum of the Northern Alliance, and fight alongside him against the Taliban. However, the mission is extremely dangerous due to the mountainous terrain, lack of roads, absence of accurate maps, and uncertainty about whether local forces will trust them. Under the cover of night, Nelson and his team are deployed into Afghanistan by helicopter. Once the helicopter leaves, they realize they are completely on their own. Soon, they encounter 2 armed men approaching them, who are initially captured but later identified as allies sent by Dostum. They walk all night and reach an outpost the next morning, called Almo by the Afghans, located 34 miles north of Mazar-i-Sharif. There, they meet a CIA agent who informs them about 3 factions within the Northern Alliance: General Dostum, General Atta, and General Mohkik, who are rivals. However, Dostum strongly opposes the Taliban. After waiting 2 days, Dostum arrives. He is shown to be a tough, intelligent, and stubborn leader who speaks multiple languages but does not fully trust the Americans. Nelson understands that gaining his trust is essential. He offers supplies and tries to convince him to lead them to the Taliban. To test Nelson, Dostum presents a challenge. He has only 6 horses for 12 men. Nelson divides his team into 2 groups and moves forward with 5 soldiers on horseback, as vehicles cannot traverse the rocky terrain. Meanwhile, A Taliban-controlled village is shown, led by Mullah Rajan, who strictly enforces Sharia law. He executes a woman publicly because her daughters were receiving modern education, which is forbidden for girls above 8 years old. Nelson and his team reach a place called Kova Caves, where they prepare to attack Taliban positions. Dostum initially refuses to let Nelson get too close, fearing that if any American is harmed, the US might withdraw support. Nelson calls in an airstrike using coordinates, but the first attempt misses. He then moves closer on horseback to provide accurate coordinates. The Taliban counterattack, leading to intense combat. Eventually, a successful airstrike hits the target. Later, it is revealed that this was a test by Dostum to confirm the Americans' loyalty. Having gained his trust, the teams regroup. Supplies dropped by parachute are looted by villagers, who later try to sell them back at high prices. A young boy assigned to watch over one soldier is explained to be responsible for reporting any harm, as Dostum enforces strict accountability. The next target is a place called Weston, the only route to Mazar-i-Sharif. Meanwhile, Nelson's superiors send additional troops due to lack of confidence. As operations continue, airstrikes weaken Taliban positions. However, during an attack, unexpected tanks appear, and without air support, Nelson and his team are forced to retreat. Back at base, they treat the wounded. Nelson emphasizes that they cannot fight tanks with horses and demands better intelligence. Dostum then reveals a critical supply route through Tangi Gap. The team continues operations for several days, eventually regrouping and launching another successful airstrike that destroys Taliban tanks. As they advance to inspect the battlefield, they discover that some Taliban fighters are still alive, lying in ambush and waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, gunfire erupts and chaos spreads everywhere. This time, Dostum and his men refuse to retreat. They stand their ground against the Taliban. Supported by Nelson and his team, Dostum launches an RPG attack and eliminates the remaining fighters, successfully capturing the area. After things calm down, Dostum approaches Nelson and shares his past. He says that when he was the ruler of this city, women did not wear burqas, girls went to school, and people watched movies in theaters. But Mullah Rajan killed his family, and that pain still remains with him. Meanwhile, Sam and his unit continue advancing, destroying several Taliban bases and their weapons. Spencer informs Nelson that headquarters does not fully trust them and has sent another team with General Atta, believing he has a better route to Mazar-i-Sharif. Now Nelson faces a new challenge, keeping the Northern Alliance united, as General Atta and Dostum are rivals. If Dostum learns Atta is involved, he may refuse to cooperate. When Nelson tells Dostum, he becomes upset and says that if Atta reaches Mazar-i-Sharif first, he will take control. He also fears Mullah Rajan's strong weaponry and refuses to risk his men's lives. He leaves with his forces, telling Nelson to fight his own battle. Now Nelson is in a difficult position. He is very close to his target, but advancing with only 12 soldiers is extremely risky. He tells his team that if they retreat, the Taliban will repeat the same destruction again. So they decide to move forward. They reach Tangi Gap and position themselves strategically. From the mountains, they observe that the Taliban force numbers at least 15,000. Airstrikes begin, causing chaos among Taliban tanks. Some fighters attempt to surrender, but Spencer suspects a trap. Suddenly, one attacker detonates a grenade, injuring Spencer badly. The situation worsens as gunfire comes from all directions. Then Nelson sees Dostum returning with his army. However, Mullah Rajan attacks them with a rocket launcher, causing a landslide that kills many of Dostum's men. Another airstrike is called. But this time even American soldiers are injured. Among them is Najib, the young boy helping the Americans, who gets buried under debris but is rescued by Ben. The biggest threat now is a rocket launcher capable of firing 40 rockets and reloading in just 2 minutes. Nelson leads a cavalry charge into the valley, risking everything to stop it. They fight their way forward, trying to reach the launcher before it reloads. During the battle, a massive explosion knocks Nelson off his horse. Meanwhile, the enemy begins reloading the launcher, but Nelson gets back up, mounts his horse again, and charges forward. With the help of Dostum and his men, they manage to capture the launcher before it can be used again. As Mullah Rajan tries to escape, his vehicle gets stuck. Dostum catches up to him and kills him, avenging his family. With all Taliban fighters defeated, peace returns to the valley. A helicopter arrives for medical evacuation and takes the injured Spencer back to base. However, the mission is not over yet. They still need to capture Mazar-i-Sharif. Nelson realizes Dostum is heading toward Atta. If the Northern Alliance splits, everything will fail. When Dostum reaches Mazar-i-Sharif, he sees people welcoming them with flowers. General Atta has arrived earlier, but instead of conflict, Dostum extends a hand of friendship, and they unite. In celebration, Dostum gives Nelson something and says that regardless of how relations between Afghanistan and America may change in the future, Nelson will always be his friend. Later, Nelson takes out the piece of metal from the Twin Towers that he carried as a reminder of the victims. After completing the mission, he buries it in the ground. Nelson and his team return to base successfully, without losing a single member. They are honored for their bravery. Nelson then returns home, where his wife is preparing for Christmas, and the movie ends. At the end, it is revealed that this mission was considered one of the most dangerous U.S. Special Forces operations. Military planners estimated it would take 2 years, but Task Force Dagger completed it in just 21 days. These 12 soldiers later became known as the Horse Soldiers. In 2014, General Dostum became the Vice President of Afghanistan, and a statue of a horse soldier was installed outside the World Trade Center in honor of these soldiers. So friends, this was the story of the movie 12 Strong, which many people find inspiring.